Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Pod.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. Just 2 weeks ago we scaled incredible heights with Top Gun Maverick, and today we plumb the depths with Jurassic World Dominion. So Dallas, we've come to the end of the Jurassic World, or is it the Jurassic Park era. How are you feeling to finally talk about it today? I know you reviewed it the other day, but we're finally going to be able to talk about this one.
Is it the end? I mean, for all intents and purposes, it was being touted as the end. A lot of the cast said, it was going to be the last film for them. But despite a critical mauling, it's done very well at the box office, nearly $400 million. So life finds a way, I'm sure, to inflict more Jurassic Park films on us, I imagine.
Yeah, so before we dive into this one, what is your feelings on the franchise? I know for a lot of people it's up and down, or it's one great movie followed by successive duds. What's your kind of franchise feeling at this moment?
Well, I mean, the first film, Jurassic Park, is a summer blockbuster masterpiece. It's just, it's intelligent, scary, action-packed. It's got everything in it that you want. Lost World has its moments. Jurassic Park 3 has talking raptors. Jurassic World, I did enjoy it when it came out. I think I sort of part of the sort of 13-year-old in me was excited to see, the final segment where the T-Rex came back to save the day. Rewatching it later on, it is, clearly just, beat for beat, pretty much the original movie done again, but with less interesting characters. Fallen Kingdom, I wasn't really a fan of, but I did appreciate that it tried to do something different. It finally got them the dinosaurs off the island. R.I.P. Brachiosaurus, probably the saddest moment in the entire saga. And then this one, for me, I have to compare it to, the Star Wars trilogy, the sequel trilogy, in the Last Jedi, very polarizing itself, but tried to do something different, set up a potential brand new look at this wider universe, only for all that to be undone by J.J. Abrams when he came back for the third one. This one feels like that, in that, it set up this thing, dinosaurs are now living among us. Is there going to be like not essentially like a war for the planet of the apes style war, but a battle, to discover who's going to be the dominant, species at the top of the food chain. And sadly, that's not the movie we got. And I guess we'll go into that. But yes, I wasn't, I was looking forward to seeing the original cast back, but I wasn't overly excited, and this was just a blazing disappointment.
Yeah, I'm much than such the same as you. Like, as a kid of the 90s, I was obsessed with the first Jurassic Park. I remember being terrified in the cinema, having the toys. I think everyone of our generation were just obsessed with dinosaurs after it, and Lost World landed at a time when I was like 10 years old, and I could not have been more into the wheelhouse for that film, and to this day I still defend it as a highly enjoyable blockbuster movie. I think it's fantastic. Jurassic Park 3, I just remembered at the time being quite excited for the film, and it certainly has some really good and interesting kind of moments, but ultimately doesn't work. Jurassic World, I enjoyed it at the time. It tapped into that childhood part of like, oh my god, like the park is open, and like, I'd love to have gone to a place like that. And then Fallen Kingdom, not great, but it kind of does some one or two little interesting kind of things. The haunted house element is I'm open to that. It's good, but yeah, this third one was absolutely terrible. I mean, I'd only ever watched Fallen Kingdom once, and I've watched all the other ones multiple times. And, I'd forgot there was like this Macy Lockwood where there was this clone girl, and I just like completely forgot all about her. And then as I started watching this film, I was like, so I was expecting a film about like dinosaurs are now roaming the world, and what is that going to be like, finally living up to that title. And it's about a clone girl and locusts. And yeah, I was just... Oh, and they're also back in another sanctuary, and just the amount of beats that were replayed or have been done better across all the other films just left me wondering, like, why on earth does this film exist? And, how big were the pay packets to get the original team back?
Yeah, no, I mean, the Maisie Lockwood storyline is just bizarre. And, it sets up in the second one that John Hammond apparently had a lot of help in his DNA reconstruction of the dinosaurs from this guy called Lockwood, played by James Cromwell, who had a daughter, and it turns out that the daughter was cloned from his original daughter, who died. And then this movie then immediately retcons that by saying, actually, no, he didn't clone her. She was cloned by herself because she was dying of a disease, and she basically genetically modified her DNA to produce a healthy version of herself. And it's just like, what? Once again, we have, and this is, not purely about the Jurassic World movies. This is a symptom of, many blockbuster franchises at the moment, is that there just doesn't seem to be a proper plan. Colin Trevorrow directed the first one. He went away to work on, the actually Rise of Skywalker, I think. Jay Bayona came in, did Fallen Kingdom, and then Colin Trevorrow got punted out the Star Wars one and decided to come back and do this one. And it's like, they kind of sort of, saw what they did in the second one. So, all right, we'll take a couple of bits of that, but we'll kind of just basically rip up whatever they did, and we'll just go back to doing what we want to do, which locusts, genetically modified locusts, which target the crops which are not biosins, and this new company which is taking over, sort of looking after or running these dinosaurs, which are now in a nature reserve in the Italian Dolomite Mountains. So you've been calling these films Jurassic World for ages. You set up the fact that they are now roaming the world free, and the second half of the film takes entire place within this. It's a park. Let's face it, it's a park in all but name, and it's just like, it just feels so regressive for the franchise. And I think that's probably what is the biggest disappointment, is that the wasted potential. Something like, I mentioned before, Matt Reeves is, actually he didn't do the first one, that was Rupert Wyatt, but he did the second one's Dawn of and War of the Planet Apes, showing how man and apes could potentially coexist but end up fighting and stuff like that. On paper it's an incredibly silly concept, but it worked out. It was actually one of the most surprisingly impressive trilogies I've seen in a long time. And someone like him, marshalling something like this, it could have been really, really good. But we got a new Batman film from him instead. So beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that felt like the only new place that this franchise could go, because ultimately I think people have said, it's kind of reached the end, but it kind of felt like it reached the end quite a bit ago. As great as dinosaurs are, they're not ultimately the most engaging of kind of villains or characters. You kind of need these human stories to complement them, and we've seen this same story done sort of over and over again. Like, we saw it done really well in Jurassic Park: The Lost World. The Jurassic Park 3 was kind of interesting enough, and so on, about this kind of family sort of looking to save one of their own, sort of a nice small scale thing. But pretty much everything since has been like crazy scientists, we've already ticked those off. Hunters, like people looking to militarize like dinosaurs and things like that. And it's just kind of like we've done these already. It's just been kind of very uninspired kind of story writing. Like I think I don't know necessarily what scope the dinosaurs over the world would have taken, but it was certainly something that hadn't been done before, and certainly gives you a bit more promise and appeal than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, there's the human villains. If you're gonna have a human villain, you have to make them a good villain, entertaining, understand their plan and stuff like that. Starving the world, is an odd one, to be able to control the crops and stuff like that. But I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a common thread running a lot of movies at the moment where the villain is essentially a socially awkward, twitchy Steve Jobs type. I mean, we had Don't Look Up, we had Mark Rylance's, tech giant. We had one in, I think it was an animated film, I think it was Ron's Called Wrong. That was a Steve Jobs type. And it just seems that, it's a grey-haired man with spectacles and, a black polo neck. And it's like, yeah, we've seen this done before, similar to the dinosaurs things. We've seen this done before. We need something new. And I mean, I know that, as a fan of the original one, I was screaming out for the return of Dodgson. Dodgson. We got Dodgson here. See, nobody cares. I mean, until the Barbasol can came up at the end, was anyone really 100% certain that this was the guy that briefly talked to Dennis Nedry at the beginning? And that can of Barbasol opens up the whole other question of what I thought, one of the Jurassic World sequels was going to be, or Jurassic Park sequels was going to be, was about finding this, can that had the dinosaur embryos, which was encased in mud, so potentially could have remained cold. The embryos could have still been viable. And that's what I thought one of the Jurassic World Park sequels was going to be, and we never got it. And I mean, what did you make of the return of Dodgson?
It's so bad, isn't it? Like I know they've obviously recast the actor for very, very obvious reasons, but I was just looking at going, really? Him? And yeah, as I say, like the whole point of Dodgson was just like, he's just this like kind of random kind of character. And then it's just like, if someone had told me that all the way back in, what was it, 93, 94, that in like nearly 20 years later, 20 plus years later, like this character would be back and it would be the lead villain, you'd be like, oh, come on, guys. Just it literally could have just been anyone. And the fact they made it was just Dodgson just was so... It was just so stupid.
It was meant to be like a nod and a wink to fans of the originals, but I don't think anyone... He wasn't strong enough a character to do it, and the performance by Campbell Scott is not good either. It's just... Yeah, it's just playing into the sort of stereotypes of these sort of, socially awkward, potentially, Asperger type things. And it's just like, I mean, really, we don't have anything new to do here. It's just like incredibly sort of disappointing.
Yeah, it was just very, it just kind of sums up the whole thing. It's just like, I can understand tapping into the nostalgia of, the bringing the original core team back, but like this was just like no one's asking for that, and it just feels so it just sums up kind of the lack of originality with these things. Like, yeah, it's not an original character whatsoever, but just then adding in this sort of like element where it's like, oh, it was that guy that was just in that one scene. It's just like, it just feels unnecessary. And I was just more annoyed. I was like, we've just gone back to just like a park again, as you mentioned, sort of like it's a park in all but name, and we're just sort of retreading a lot of the same things. As soon as someone got in a car, it was like, right, there's going to be a problem with the car, and the dinosaurs are going to get loose, which I kind of felt like did I doze off for a moment? Because it seemed to go from like 1 to 100 really quickly, of like these locusts went on fire, and then sort of the dinosaurs were running loose, and then everyone was missing from the facility. Like, where did everyone vanish off to? Like, I don't really know what happened there.
Yeah, I don't think it really explained. It's like the dinosaurs had some sort of microchip in their head, so if there was an emergency, they would be called back to safety within the facility. But the humans, I think, were getting on shuttles and then were they going into a bunker, or were they getting shipped out? That sort of plot point was sort of glossed over quite quickly as to where all the people went. So we were essentially then just left with the sort of two sets, the sort of Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard's characters who were searching for they're now taking care of this cloned girl. So they're trying to get her back from the park, and the original team are investigating the locusts. And of course, they all arrive, at the park together and for this face off. And I guess, before we get into the ending, I do want to, I'm being very, very, very negative about the film. It's not that difficult. But I do want to highlight, one particular scene which showcased, what this movie could have been, and that is the Malta sequence where Owen Grady and I want to say Claire Dearing, I think that's their character names. I mean, they made such little impact with the three films I've basically forgotten. So they're looking for their kidnapped daughter, and essentially they're in Malta, and what we get exposed to is just a little glimpse of, I expect what the world would be if there was dinosaurs and stuff like that. A black market trade in smaller dinosaurs, in, dinosaur venom, dinosaur teeth, objects and stuff like this. And yeah, that was actually, really interesting to see that sort of thing. And then we got a sort of, I guess, Bourne Bond-esque chase where Owen Grady is on a motorcycle running through Malta, being chased by raptors who have been trained by scent and laser pointers to be able to track and kill a target. It's out there, it's wild, but that was very entertaining. Even to the point where one raptor does the jump from I think it's the Bourne Ultimatum, where he sort of jumps off a building and then through a window. And it turns out actually there's a very easy joke to make, because actually there is one of the Bourne novels is called the Bourne Dominion. So maybe that was an in reference there. But I mean, that sequence was very entertaining. It's just a shame that that came probably towards the end of the sort of first act, or at the beginning of the second act perhaps. And yeah, nothing was really able to live up to that sequence.
Yeah, I think that was the one bit where it was like, oh, this was the film that we all expected to see, and it kind of,
it's easy to see why they led with that in the trailer as opposed to anything else.
Like I think there was elements.
No locusts.
No, yeah, and it kind of tied in. You're like, oh, that kind of black market justifies how I can imagine these dinosaurs have somehow spread across the world. I think they've gone from like somewhere in North America to all across the world and across continents. And you think of some of their size, you're like, well, how would a T-Rex get to there? How would a Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus get to the glades of Africa? So, that kind of helped make, a leap for me. But, we've kind of spoken about the locusts. I know that they wanted to make a science thriller with this film, and the locusts are certainly something a little bit different. But what did you make of the locusts as this sort of the key reason to bring back our kind of key original team players into the film?
It just felt like an excuse to get Ellie Sattler, Alan Grant, and Ian Malcolm back on, not the island, but back into a park together again. Because, at that point, they've got no link to the other subplot. So they needed something in order to bring them back in. I'm sure it could have been dinosaur related, but no, they want to go with locusts, which were destroying crops and stuff like that. And, there is, points to be made about genetically modifying crops, how, tampering with science and stuff like that. You got, Ian Malcolm's whole speech at the beginning, before you knew what to do with it, you slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, you started selling it. Before you figured out, whether or not you could, you didn't stop thinking if you should, and, there's bits at the end which kind of look at the potential ecological impact of, what we're doing. And, essentially, if we are not top of the food chain and whatever, it's kind of our own fault because we brought back the dinosaurs in the first place. And there's also this ridiculous quote or something in one of the things about Colin Trevorrow. There's two writers on it. Emily Carmichael wanted to make, the movie that we all wanted to see about, men versus dinosaurs and stuff like that. And then Colin Trevorrow was like saying that he wanted dinosaurs to act like animals, and that they wouldn't behave in a way that an animal wouldn't do, and so they wouldn't go around attacking people in the cities and stuff like that. And it's like, that, well, I think there's animals in, say, like New York Zoo. If a lion escaped from New York Zoo, I'm pretty sure that it would get freaked and probably end up attacking quite a few people and stuff like that. If you just drop dinosaurs into a city and stuff like that, I think there would probably be a bit of carnage going on. So I think that's the thing that just didn't really make much sense. And yeah, no, the locust thing was just an entire waste of time, and they could have easily brought back the characters via another means. Whether it was Bryce Dallas Howard going to them to talk about, the was it illegal trafficking and stuff like that. At the beginning, she's sort of trying to break dinosaurs out of these illegal breeding pens and stuff like that. Again, something they're doing that at the moment with sort of puppy farms and things like that. So, there was a way to bring them in that way. And yeah, the locust thing just felt completely pointless.
Yeah, I was the same. Like, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, and then it's just like when they were leaning into like, this is the key reason that brings people together. And I can almost imagine like subverting expectations, but like it just was done in such a poor, silly way where you're kind of like, you could do anything you wanted here, but you're making locusts the big thing. Like, I'm sure there would be more interesting ways to provide sort of a global level extinction event. And even at the beginning, it feels like they go to this whole level of breaking into the compound, getting all these things, when it's like, Sadler at the beginning is like, oh, I noticed, like, once again they are not attacking biosyn crops, and it's like, oh well, clearly biosyn are behind it all. And it's like, that seems like a pretty good enough reason to go to her friend at the Times and go, yeah, there's definitely a trend here. Let's kind of expose biosyn as potentially being involved. It just felt like we'd already kind of dealt with that within the first few minutes that they were behind it all. There was no big mystery.
Yeah, I didn't understand the need to get extra proof. I mean, you just have to look at the patterns, and it's like there's something quite clearly dodgy going on here. It's like, it just was like, yeah, we need them all back together, so let's come up with this excuse, and that was the best one that they could come up with. And yeah, it was just excruciating.
Yeah, definitely very kind of poor. So I think you could say in most cases this would be the nail in the coffin. But as I say, it's did such huge money despite the critical slamming over the weekend. Do you think this is the end for? There was quite a break between 3 and World. Do you think that's going to be the case again here?
It's difficult because, yeah, like you see, it has made a lot of money. And well, the problem is, and I'm going to go into slight spoilers here, and this is one of my other big sort of complaints about the film is, spoilers. If you haven't seen Jurassic World Dominion, I apologize, but when you have 8 or 9 people get on a helicopter at the end of a Jurassic Park movie, you haven't done your job. I'm sorry. People, they don't go, people say they don't go to Jurassic World movies for the plot. They go to see dinosaurs eating people. And there is not enough dinosaurs eating people in this movie for my liking. There never feels like any sort of real stakes or peril. None of the main characters ever sort of really feel in danger. And the fact that, hardly anyone was injured or killed in this was very disappointing. You just sort of Top Gun the other week, we talked about real stakes and how they build up about this incredibly difficult mission, to the point where when you go into the final mission, you don't know who's going to make it out. Here, it never felt like anyone was in danger. Scream, when that came out earlier this year, they were bringing back the main characters, and as sadistic as it was, I was like, well, I will only accept them coming back as if one of the main characters gets killed off. And I was kind of like here thinking the same thing, that somebody has to make the sacrifice play or something like that in order to make it worth it, otherwise it just feels like, oh well, we went for a jolly day out and oh yeah, look, we saw the dinosaurs, as we always do, and then I mean, it's like when I'm thinking the likes of Muldoon and Eddie Carr and stuff like that, where it's like the Jurassic World films, it feels like the most impactful death is the one that's been memed about 1,000 times, which is the poor sort of babysitting assistant who gets picked up by the pterodactyl and then munched on by the plesiosaur or whatever it was. It's like that's the most iconic death in the series and stuff like that. And there was maybe a moment where Ian Malcolm does is trying to get the, not a T-Rex, but whatever the main carnivore is these days. I forget the names. They gloss over these. He's trying to get its attention with a flaming stick and stuff like that. It's repeating beats, like you say, from the original, and you think, okay, maybe he's gonna make the sacrifice play here. Ian Malcolm was actually never meant to survive the first Jurassic Park. In the book, he dies of, I think, morphine overdoses due to his injuries. But obviously, Jeff Goldblum was such an entertaining character that, they kind of reworked it. So he got out and became sort of the big star of the movies for a while. So I thought, maybe he's going to go out in a blaze of glory. But, no, they've kept everyone alive to potentially bring them back for another sequel down the road. I think there will be something. They will wait a while, but there will be. I don't know if will the dinosaurs die out again, but there's always going to be a way to bring them back. They've got DNA on stuff like that. But I think this is certainly a film which it does need to go away for a long time before they think about ever doing anything. But I think it's played out, and it'd be too easy to make the extinct puns. I already made a few in my review, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so yeah, I think it's kind of one of those ones now where we spoke about it briefly the other day of like, what is next to look forward to? There's just not much really, is there? It's turning into be a bit of a lackluster year. It was kind of felt like we got crammed all these movies last year, and now we're kind of just like, where do we go next?
Yeah, it's like COVID delayed the release of so many films, but now COVID has kind of delayed the production of quite a few. It's like when you get Top Gun Maverick and they're advertising Mission Impossible and it's not out for another year. It's like, oh yeah, well, what is there? We've got Thor, Lightyear, Elvis, it's going to be, what comes out at Venice, because, I think we discussed, not on the podcast, but also about how underwhelming Cannes seemed in terms of like generating like a Parasite breakout hit. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out, but I think it's going to be a summer of festivals, isn't it? Edinburgh, Venice, London. That's where I think the source of my cinematic excitement is going to be coming from for the next few months, because I'm not really feeling it with Thor, apart from Natalie Portman's guns. Apart from that, I'm not all that fussed.
Yeah, so that's an exciting way. We weren't fussed about the movie. We're not fussed about the rest of the year. Look forward to us moaning for the rest of the year. Hopefully there's plenty of surprises along the way.
Well, Bodies is getting a release in the UK soon. Not a confirmed date, so yeah, I think there'll be more exciting things to come on the A24 project. They've got quite a few films still to come out over the summer. But general, I guess, we'll have to pick and choose our battles more wisely.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd